Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the DC Capstone Report. Another week reporting on Alabama football. It's another great time to be back with you again to talk about Alabama football. Coming off of a great victory against the Mississippi State Bulldogs, 41-0. Today in the podcast, in the first segment, we're going to review the Mississippi State game. In the second segment, we're going to name our standout players of the game. And in the third and final segment, we'll talk about a preview of the bye week on what to look for, what can Alabama do to improve on during the bye week.
You're listening to the DC Capstone Report. The DC Capstone Report is featured each Tuesday morning on the Martin Houston Show at Tide 100.9. You can listen live at Tide100.9.com.
Well, in the first segment, we're going to take a look at the review of the Mississippi State game. The Mississippi State Bulldogs came to town, the short drive over from Starkville, Mississippi, bringing in a new coach and Mike Leach with a upbeat, up-tempo passing attack. And Alabama did a great job. As we start out this podcast in the first segment, I have to talk about the defense and the defensive performance that we saw on Saturday night. It was a night game in Bryant-Denny Stadium under the lights. The LED lights were flickering and going off on Halloween, also Coach Saban's birthday. So happy belated birthday to Coach Saban. And a great victory for the Alabama Crimson Tide. We got to talk about the defense. We got to start talking about defense. Well, what I want to talk about today in the very beginning is I've often been critical of our defense and our defensive coordinator, Pete Golding, on how he called the plays and how he got how he didn't adapt and didn't change. Well, I want to start this podcast off and this review of the Mississippi State game and talking about how the defense adapted and changed in this game. Mississippi State brought in a high-powered offensive attack under Mike Leach. He always has a pass-happy offense. It's something that he's known for. And they come into Bryant-Denny Stadium, and Coach Saban has said earlier in the week, this is something that we don't plan for. It's an attack that you don't see much. And what I was so impressed with is when they first came out, Alabama came out in a dime set, playing some zone, using their linebackers and their defensive scheme well. And it really goes away from what Coach Saban is known for, but it worked. And I have to give credit where credit is due. Coach Saban, Pete Golding, the other defensive coaches being able to go in and say, hey, we're going to do what we think is best. We're going to watch film from the LSU game where Mississippi State shredded LSU, the LSU defense on man-to-man coverage. And then we're going to watch the film where the other teams that came up against Mississippi State did a good job of preparing and playing a defensive scheme of zone combo coverage with the dime personnel in that gave an opportunity for it to be successful. And Mississippi State didn't have near as much success in the previous games leading up to the Alabama game. I was so impressed with the fact that the Alabama coaches made the change and didn't just stick with the same old thing. They were able to adapt. And I thought Pete Golding called a really good game in this game, got us in the right coverages, got us in the right schemes. And I think the first credit goes to the coaches on being able to change. The second credit has to go to the players themselves. Now, this Alabama team, this Alabama defense has been much maligned all year long. And they came out and played with a lot more passion. They came out and played a lot more aggressively. They got pressure on the quarterback. They were tackling better. All aspects of the game were improved over the last several performances by our defense. And I like what Devonta Smith. Devonta Smith had a great game. We'll talk about him when we get to the offense and we get to standout players. But in the post-game press conference, when asked about the defensive performance, because it was well documented that we were kind of down defensively, he said, and I quote, "I think you guys made them mad," talking about the media types who were talking about the Alabama defense not being as good. And what that tells me is the players themselves took an offense to what people have been talking about them not doing well. And they took ownership in being able to come out and play with passion, play with aggressiveness, tackle well, and do all the fundamental things well. So I think it's one thing for the coaches to put them in the right schemes and to make a change to do the coverages different to stack up against this pass-happy offense. But it's another thing for the players to buy into that and over a week's time be able to know what their assignments are and do a good job of completing their assignments. And all the while doing it with aggressiveness, doing it with emotion, and playing with a lot of passion. So I saw something in our defense I hadn't seen in a while. To the ball, flying around the field, making plays, being excited afterwards, high-fiving, being excited about what they're doing on defense. They had some takeaways. They had some had a pick six. And I just have to think that the players themselves really implemented and executed the game plan on defense well. And our defensive backs, which has been a little weak link in coverages, really did a good job, especially with the dime package in there. And I think having that dime package, that extra defensive back in there, really did well. And they accomplished that by sometimes leaving both linebackers in and taking off a defensive lineman and rushing forward and having two linemen and two outside backers rushing. And that really got some pressure. We saw, Will Anderson get some pressure several times. We saw the push the pocket with the defense up the middle with Christian Barmore and Fendarian Mathis and Byron Young trying to get some pressure up the middle. And we saw Allen on the outside rusher get a sack. So we saw a lot of different schemes that allowed them. Usually when Alabama goes in the dime package, they take out one of their linebackers, middle linebackers. But at this time we saw them taking out a lineman and having two rushers on the outside, the two middle linebackers, two defensive linemen in the middle, rushing four, and leaving both middle linebackers into play. So Dylan Moses and Christian Harris was flying all over the field making tackles. So we did a great job. The stats bear it out. They 0 points on the board for a high-powered offense, held them to less than 165 yards passing and 2 interceptions. And then the defense on stopping the run. Now, Mississippi State always been a good running team, but this year with more emphasis on the pass, hasn't been much on the run. Their leading rusher had 32 yards, and the second leading rusher had 4 yards, and the third leading rusher had 1 yard. So 3 players on the field, and they booked for less than 38 yards for the game. So just an outstanding defensive performance in this game. Well, sometimes when the defense does so well, it may overshadow the offense. Well, the offense didn't have their best game. How you say that, though? They scored 41 points. Well, it's because you have to compare them against themselves. They're the standard, and they've set a standard for deep balls and deep plays and running wide open and catching passes and running the ball well. Well, we did do that in this game. We ran the ball well. We had, between Trey Sanders and Najee Harris, Trey Sanders ran for 80 yards and Najee Harris ran for 119 yards. Brian Robinson was a little banged up, so he didn't get to run as much, but Trey Sanders did a good job when he got carried. So running for over 200 yards in this game was really good job. They say Mac Jones had an off day. He had an off day, and he throws 4 touchdown passes, 291 yards, 24 of 31. So, I don't think that our offense played that bad. I just don't think it played upon a standard that we've set for ourselves. But our offense did a really good job in this game of taking what the defense gave them. One of the things I think that was different played in this game was that Mississippi State played in a nickel the whole entire time and tried to make Mac Jones make some choices to throw deep where they could intercept the ball and get some turnovers. But what in reality he did, he made some choices to throw on more shallow routes and did a really good job of game management in this game. So overall, I think the defense played great. Overall, I think the offense played really good in this game. Maybe not as what most people thought they would do, but I think overall in this game against Mississippi State, we came out with a 41-0 victory, and I think there's a lot to be proud of in this victory over Mississippi State. Well, in the second segment today, we're going to talk about our standout players of the game. Let's start on offense. Standout player of the game, the standout offensive player on both sides of the ball, and probably had the best game of anybody that day, had to be Devonta Smith. Devonta Smith, I think, took a little umbrage with the fact that people were saying, hey, we lost Jalen Waddle. How is it going to affect us now? We'll give you a difference. He goes out and catches 11 balls for 203 yards, 4 touchdowns. had one of his best days ever as an Alabama wide receiver. So he did a really good job. And I just have to say that he's not only a great wide receiver, but he's a great role model. He's a great strong player. He played with a lot of emotion. And everything that he did on the offensive side of the ball shows you what kind of a standout he is. I believe that going forward, this game is going to kind of catapult him into having even better offensive production down the road. How can you get better than 203 yards and 4 touchdowns? Well, I think he had a better game against Mississippi before last year. So I think the sky's the limit for Devonta Smith. And I think in this game, he may have played himself into a first-round draft pick in the NFL, and he might become the best wide receiver to ever play at the University of Alabama. That remains to be seen the rest of the year. But Devonta Smith is one of my standout players of the game on offense. Another standout player of the game on offense doesn't get mentioned as much. Had to be offensive lineman Evan Neal. Evan Neal does a great job at that right tackle position. He did a good job protecting Mac Jones in this game, but did an excellent job in rushing. Rushed for almost over 200 yards in this game, and he did a really good job on rushing offense, on blocking. So I was excited to be able to name Evan Neal. In the offseason, we saw what he could do physically as the physical attributes in some of his workouts. And I think if somebody who's really taking advantage of the strength and conditioning players with his first step quickness, his strength, his endurance, Evan Neal has really, in my opinion, solidified that offensive line. The play across the offensive line has been great, but when you got Landon Dickerson, Emil Achior, and Evan Neal on the right side to go along with Deontay Brown and Alex Leatherwood on the left side, that has really one solid offensive line, and their play has been stellar this year. But I think Evan Neal in this game really has stepped up and did a good job. So he was my other outstanding standout offensive player of the game. On defense, I have 3 on defense, and I could have picked from a lot when you have a 41-0 game, and there's many people who are doing a good job. I had a lot of people to pick from, but I picked from 3 in the defensive backfield because I was very critical of our defensive backs going into this year, and I said they would be the weak link, and I think because they were so young. And in the first few games, they proved me right. But in this game, I think the defensive backs really stepped up and did well. So first of all, another want to stand out. Gets another standout player of the game award for me this year, and that is Malachi Moore, the freshman. Malachi Moore, he played a great game. Number 3, he had 3 tackles and 5 assists in this game for a total of 8. Just did a really good job of keeping coverage on the receivers. He did a good job in man coverage, did a good job in zone coverage, did a good job in run support. I just thought that he had a great game. A freshman, now really in his 6th game of playing for the University of Alabama, and did a great job. He was a freshman standout by the SEC this week as well. Another standout player of the game on defense had to be another freshman that we haven't heard from much this year because he hadn't got much time to play, and that is Brian Branch. Early in the preseason, Brian Branch and Malachi Moore were going back and forth as to who was going to be able to start, who was going to be the one to start at that nickelback position. And Malachi Moore won that starting job, but Brian Branch was not too far behind. So when we come in with the dime coverage, you bring in an extra defensive back. Brian Branch was the first one to get the call to do that. In this game, he had 4 tackles and 3 assists for 7 overall. He did a good job in coverage. He did a great job in run support. And him and Malachi Moore together, you could tell as freshmen, played and fed off of each other's emotions. So I was really excited about Brian Branch and what he brings to the table. I would love to see, as we face some other teams down the road that like to throw the ball a lot, I would love to see us play in this dime set and have Brian Branch on the field, because he is not a drop off in run support. He did a really good job of tackling this game, made several good hits on the short, shallow crossing routes and the running back. So I think Brian Branch and Malachi Moore, being freshmen, outstanding job in this game. And my third and final player, defensive standout player of the game, it had to be Patrick Surtain. I think Patrick Surtain does a good job in everything that he does. He didn't get picked on a lot. They didn't throw the ball his way a lot. They didn't throw the ball Josh Job's way a lot because they just didn't go down the field and test us deep. They threw a lot of shallow crossing routes where our dime and nickel coverage and linebackers got in on the plays. But Patrick Surtain played a great job in this game. He had a pick six. He took the ball back for a touchdown on an interception, and really did a good job assisting on run support when he kept the plays going inside. And what I mean by that is this scheme that Mike Leach likes to run, he loves to spread the wideouts way out to get your cornerbacks toward the sideline, so that you have a lot of crossing routes and a lot of be able to get outside on wheel routes with your tight end and your running backs. And that didn't happen in this game because Patrick Surtain always was able to push his man toward the middle of the field and set their edge really well. So Patrick Surtain is my other defensive standout players of the game. So my standout players of the game on offense are Devonta Smith and Evan Neal, and on defense, two freshmen, Malachi Moore and Brian Branch, and Patrick Surtain. Well, in the third and final segment, we're going to take a look at our preview. We always preview the upcoming game, but this week we have a bye week. So what I want to look at is during this bye week, what can Alabama do to improve? What do we need to do? I think there's three things that we need to concentrate on this week. And I think if we concentrate on these three things, it sets us up for the second half of the season where we go into Baton Rouge to play LSU, the defending national champions, in a week. And then we have big games against Kentucky, Auburn, and Arkansas to finish out the year. So what do we have to do to get better? Number one thing is we've got to use the bye week to get healthy. I think we got a lot of players that are banged up. We saw in this game Brian Robinson, he was limited a little bit with a little ding. Miller Forstall's got a little ding on his shoulder. Slade Bolden has a little ding on his arm. When I talk about all these, that's just on the offensive side of the ball. We've got players on defense that's banged up and dinged up all over the place. So I think we need to use this week to get healthy. I think it's going to be a credit to our strength and conditioning coaches. It's going to have to be a credit to our training staff and our facilities that we have to use everything we have, from the cryo chamber all the way down to the pools and the whirlpool tubs. Whatever we can, what can we do this week to get healthy? And sometimes it means just a good old rest. I think Coach Saban has been one that during bye weeks he gives players off some time to rest. So I think we need to get healthy in our dinged upness, but we also need to stay healthy from the COVID and make sure that we don't use this bye week as a chance to indulge and get around people that may not have been around. So if we can get healthy and stay healthy this week, that's the number one thing we need to do to use this bye week. Now, the second thing is we need to build on the defensive momentum that we have established in the last two games. From the second half of the Georgia game through the Tennessee game all the way into the Mississippi State game, we have been building on defensive momentum. I think we need to look at the way we played in the Mississippi State game and see if there's any of those schemes that we can utilize going forward with some of the teams that like to throw the ball and get us in the right plays at the right time. So I really believe if we can build on this defensive momentum that we have established since the second half of the Georgia game, we'll have an opportunity to come out and really make a statement next week, week after next, when we play LSU in Baton Rouge. I know that we want to be able to exert our will on defense, and if we do that and build on that defensive emotion that we have built up and this momentum, then I think that's the second thing that'll be the most important thing we do during the bye week. So our first is to get healthy. The second is to build on the defensive momentum. And then the third is I think we need to use this time on offense to develop that next deep threat at wide receiver position. I think Slade Bolden does a great job, and Slade Bolden is going to be able to play that slot receiver. But he can't play the slot receiver like Jalen Waddle could. And what I mean by that is Slade Bolden is fast, but he doesn't have the speed in order to stretch the defense from the slot deep like Jalen Waddle did. And what that does, when you can stretch the defense deep with Jalen Waddle, that usually puts a safety on John Mechie or Devonta Smith. And when you put a safety on Devonta Smith, it's just unfair. We saw several times in this game against Mississippi State when a safety got matched up with Devonta Smith that it was unfair. He just was able to catch the ball and get himself open. So I think we can use this time wisely to develop that next player. And in my opinion, I said it from the beginning in preseason, that next player is number 5, freshman Javon Baker. I know that you got the Holden and Theo Bell in this. There's opportunity for them as well, but I think the man is Javon Baker. He showed in preseason from everybody that I talked to that he was a deep ball threat. He has hands. People have described him like Amari Cooper. And so I think that they can develop him, give him a full week to get him in the game plan, let him have some kind of role in the LSU game, get whatever it may be, bring him in spots to have a role in the LSU game to open that deep threat for a third deep threat. Then I think we're going to have a really, really good opportunity to improve our offense when we go into Baton Rouge. So the 3 things I think we need to concentrate on in this bye week is to get healthy and stay healthy, to build upon the defensive momentum, and to finally develop that third wide receiver deep threat, which I think it's going to be Javon Baker. Well, thank you for tuning in again this week. Lance and I are always amazed at the number of people, the thousands that turn out to view our podcast. And Lance has some great pictures up at freelancepictures.com of the last game against Mississippi State. You can look at those there. You can check us out on dccapstonereport.com, and we would love for you to like our page on Facebook at DC Capstone Report. Well, until next week, this is DC signing off from Tuscaloosa and saying Big Roll Tide.